working for the weekend. We've been breaking borders, leaving speechless. Haters talk about all this, leaving teethless. Women I have slaughtered cause they decent. I'm coming for they daughters, leave them decent. Future you was all up in the creases. You don't hang with ballers, said we beefing. If I don't get the call, then make we need it. Yeah, what? Yeah, me.
Hi, my name is Lindy Jung. I am a speculative fiction author and a YouTuber who makes videos about books, travel, writing, and pretty much whatever else I feel like. This is another writing vlog in that Write a Fantasy Novel with Me series that I kind of low-key abandoned for a couple months there, but we'll get into that. So if you're new here, this is part 6 of a ongoing series where I'm just documenting the process of writing a young adult fantasy novel that is a fairy tale retelling. I haven't told you guys what fairy tale it is, I'm pretty sure, but it's basically secondary fantasy that follows two girls whose lives get really entangled in one another, and it's very sapphic and a little bit like wistful, I would say, is the primary tone. This was originally conceived as a very anti-colonial novel and has since gone on to really grasp themes that are more along the lines of being the immigrant kid in a foreign country and just acclimation and where the line is drawn. That's basically what's going on, and that's what I've been working on. I also am working on an adult dark academia fantasy, but that's not part of this vlog. Recently, I found that I've been working on that adult book a lot more. I haven't really been gravitating toward this YA, even though this vlog series is very much focused on that project. So I'm actually gonna bounce back to that YA for a second. Yeah, I'm gonna film it, record it. It's currently January 21st. It is a Saturday. It's a little bit past lunch. It's like 1:28, so I've eaten my fill. I've been eating like really decently lately, which is not usual for me at home. But I'm about to make myself a little bit of tea. I think the best way to tackle this is to run some sprints, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and maybe see if any of my running friends are up to do a couple sprints with me. I'll update you guys a little bit on the progress as things are going along. I definitely want this vlog to be a little bit more like in-depth discussion because I am in the drafting phase, so I'm thinking a lot more about the story, these characters. I'm trying to immerse myself, so I'll be sharing more details about the story as this goes on. At this point, I am just trying to find my flow. I had a longer draft that I actually scrapped in between part 5 and part now of this vlog. So I'm currently at 4,453 words in my primary document, and let's see if we can add a little bit more to that. Before I get into all of the B-roll, one thing I did want to share with you guys is this word count tracker. As you can see, I have been diligently tracking my word count since the first day of this year. I was a little bit more on top of my writing goals until like basically the past week or so. What this does is it's a Google Sheets document thing. It's a Google Sheets spread. And it was pre-made. I found it on Reddit, so I'll include that link in the description box if you're into statistical analysis or just stats tracking like I am. Here I've got the date. I manually enter the date each time, and then which project I'm working on. So far I have 2 logged in this, the adult dark academia, which is called Moths, and SWANS, which is the young adult fantasy I'll be working on today. It tracks like how much time it takes you to write each bit or chunk, and I'm not really into that. I might try out that feature a little bit because I'm sprinting today. And then your starting word count and your ending word count. So it'll give you your total word count for each project each day, and if you do the timing thing, it'll give you the time spent and word per minute. And this portion of the word count tracker tracks all of the words you've written across all projects each day. So yeah, as you can see, I kind of had a dry run for a while there. And you can see my total output for this year so far is 5,415, which is a little bit shabby, and then it'll give me my average for each day of the week, which also is displayed here. I really enjoy this. I find it so satisfying to quantify my progress and my writing work. Really, every time I write, I record it in this. So I'm not missing any days, just the days that I don't write, which I've always thought of myself as someone who writes at least a little bit every day, but lately that just hasn't been the case. So we're gonna get more on top of that right now, starting right now. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll see you guys on the other side. I just wanted to give like a tiny update because it's 3:04 p.m. on Saturday, and I think this is gonna be my last filming thing for today. I'm just not really in like a talking to the camera kind of mood, but I have been doing really well in terms of my writing. I just breached 5,000 words at a really good 15-minute sprint, and I'm gonna do a couple more. They're just solo sprints right now. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about what part of the project I'm on. So I currently am reworking Act 1 because this is a dual POV novel, and I always sort of struggle with balancing those introductions. Like, there's so much that you have to do and there's multiple points of view. You have to introduce each point of view character and their supporting cast. Like, you're basically doing all of the setup beats, but twice. I mean, that's, you know, once you get rolling with multiple POVs, a lot of the time the plot lines kind of merge, so it's not as difficult, but you have to do all of that setup, intro stuff, and do it twice and do it well so it doesn't feel like you're just doing the same thing twice, and so that it doesn't drag on. Right now I'm kind of struggling with that a little bit. I feel like it's really messed up the pacing, and that's why I was super unsatisfied with the initial version of this draft that I was working on when I first filmed vlogs for this series. I'm feeling a lot better about this because previously the second point of view character, as in the one who's introduced second, I feel like her stakes weren't as clear, but I gave her a little bit more baggage coming into the castle and that situation. Yeah, there's just like a little bit more tension there. It feels a little bit more like I've upped the ante slightly. I'm hoping that reads a little bit better. I'm going to wrap up her chapter today, I think, and then see where I go from there, and I'll put up my finishing word count at some point. But yeah, all in all, pretty good writing day. One thing I will say is that I hate these days where I end up glued to my computer. I was also working on editing a video so I could put it out. Yeah, I just feel like I haven't really been outside. I haven't felt super productive, so I might take a walk or something just so I can get some vitamin D. It's already starting to feel like spring, even though we're not even in February yet. Just Southern California is so weird. Another thing is my house, or my parents' house, gets really dark, like really early. And I never quite understood why, but you know what? We're gonna go ahead and just roll with it. I'm sorry that my lighting situation is basically always like this because it basically is always dark here. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next update. Back for a little update. It's currently Monday, January 23rd. I'm in the attic of my parents' house because it is the most isolated part of the house, and I'm really determined to get some more writing today. Yesterday I did a singular sprint and got like 500-ish words for my adult dark academia, and today I want to dive right back into that young adult fantasy. And I also wanted to take this time to talk a little bit about finding motivation. It's probably not a surprise to anyone, and I think this is also really common for writers, but finding motivation to work on projects and continue to work on them until they're actually finished has always been a real issue for me. I think it's so easy for me, especially as someone who tends to come up with a lot of ideas very quickly and get excited about those. It's like really hard to love a project with enough depth to actually like consistently feel excited about it. And I think that's one of the things that I've been struggling with recently. My first book that I queried with, went out on submission with, that was one that I've been working on for years, and I never really lost my love for it. I truly like deeply love those characters in that world, as silly as it all felt sometimes because I'd been working on it since I was 9 years old. It felt like I grew up with those characters. And then moving on to the next book that I worked on, which was the young adult fantasy based off of Korean myth and legend and history. That one I was a little less stoked about, but I was still really excited. I still had that like fresh feeling of being able to work on the next book, like a new book that wasn't the one I'd been working on. And now I'm just not feeling the level of excitement that I felt for either of those projects for the books I'm working on now. I think it's really important. One of the realizations that I've had has been that I'm not going to feel super excited about every book. I'm not ever going to love a project like I love that first story that I've been working on since I was literally in elementary school or however old I was. And just coming to terms with that and realizing that I still do have these aspirations to become a traditionally published writer, and the only way to more or less make sure or control that and to sort of make that dream into a reality is to keep writing books and to keep finishing them and to write things that are a little bit more commercialized. The projects that I work on and the projects that I tend to put my whole heart into and love are not ones that typically sell well. At the end of the day, I just need to keep writing, and finding that motivation by thinking more about my career as a whole instead of individual books has been helpful for me. But I'm also trying really hard to find motivation to love these books. It's been working. I especially really like my adult dark academia idea. It excites me in a way that is different from past projects. It excites me because it's challenging. It's like the most challenging book I've ever written. And the main character is like a disaster person. Like, she's such a horrible mess, and a lot of her messiness lines up with my messiness. So I feel like that has been really interesting to explore just on a personal level. As for my young adult fantasy, which is the main one that I am talking about in this vlog, I feel excited by the fact that it is just like kind of a lot of fun. Like, it's messy, it's drama, a lot is going on. I don't know, this is the first young adult fantasy that I've gone into kind of like with world building in mind, like sort of at the forefront of my mind. At the end of the day, the thing that I'm writing for is always characters, but I'm thinking about world building a little bit more with this one. I've been really enjoying that, and I've enjoyed curating a very specific vibe and aesthetic. I feel like this is one of those projects that can be summed up with aesthetics, if that makes sense. Like, it's very visual to me. All of these like unique elements have been helping me feel a little bit more motivated to write it. More importantly, I've been having a good time with it. Yeah, today it's like not lunchtime yet, so I'm gonna just work for a couple hours. I think I might do a couple sprints just to get the ball rolling, but I found that I don't like having the bulk of my drafting hours be sprints, if that makes sense, because I don't like the quality of work that I put out when I'm sprinting. But yeah, so I'm going to be working on that young adult fantasy today. And in terms of word count, let's go ahead and take a look at that and see what's going on there, because that'll be interesting to see. I am at about 6,779 words. I'm going to try and see if I can hit 8,000 words today, more or less. If I can hit 10,000, that'd be even better. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. And then I think I'll take a little break in a bit to do the Q&A portion of this vlog. Okay, so that was a really productive session, and it's just about to hit lunchtime, so I figured I'd do the little Q&A portion just to get that out of the way so I can return to work after eating. So like 3-ish weeks ago, I know this vlog came out a lot later than I was intending, I sent out a little call in my community tab for questions. If you guys don't keep up, I occasionally just post things in that tab. I got a couple of questions in, and I wanted to go ahead and answer them. I haven't really looked through them, so this will be a little bit of a surprise thing, so I'm just gonna go through them in order. So the first question is from Adam. His question is, how often when you're writing a scene does the intrusive thought pounce on you of what a publisher will think? What methods do you typically turn to boost your confidence in the commercial viability of what you're writing? These are super good questions. I would say that it's not so much when I'm writing a scene. Like, when I'm actively drafting, I'm able to sort of get into the flow of the moment, so I'm not thinking so much about like, oh, publication, but definitely when I'm brainstorming or outlining, like at those stages when I have to come up with the plot and the meat of the story, I'm definitely like, oh my god, are there enough tropes in this? Or like, is this viable, or is this trend gonna be dead by the time I finish this book? That one comes up a lot. So yes, basically, yes, that does happen for me. And I think it would generally happen for any sort of like person who is pursuing traditional publishing, because there's always that uncertainty. No matter how much market savvy you may have, you can never really know for sure. And since writing books takes a lot of time, especially if you want to make them like quality, just not knowing what trends will be viable by the time you're done with the book and ready to go on submission, like that's really like a lot. I think to boost my confidence, I've just gone to, you know, just like enjoying myself and fulfilling myself and my own creative desires as much as possible. I still want to keep certain trends and tropes in mind. Like, for example, up until relatively recently, I like would never have written a vampire book because I know that one has played out its time. At the same time, we're seeing like an uptick in that, or we were sort of recently, so you never know. Trends are very cyclical, time is a circle. I think, yeah, just enjoying myself and writing what speaks to me and hoping it'll turn out for the best, and if not, that book and those tropes and that plot concept. Like, the time for those things might come eventually. I think that's all you can really say. And I really believe in building a strong backlist, so I think that's kind of what I've been going for, is like every time a book dies on sub, which thankfully has only happened once, I'm like, okay, so that's a backlist book. I'm never gonna completely turn away from it and think, okay, it's dead, like it's never gonna happen, because that's just not true. Next question is from Lydia. The question is, what's the most important writing lesson you've learned? And how's the grad school hunt going? I'll answer the second one first. I am not applying to grad school this cycle. I'll be applying later this year for next year. The reason for that is I have a job now lined up, and it's a seasonal job, and I also plan to move overseas again later this year, or hopefully, fingers crossed, I will be doing that. I'm applying to do that basically. And I just needed to take a step back. Some stuff happened where I just had to completely reevaluate the path I was taking in my life, and I realized I didn't want to jump into grad school straight away. I'm not sick of school because I like learning and I'm a nerd, but I definitely need to take a break from that cycle of school and like sort of enjoy my life again, because I think the combination of school and my job, it was like really grueling. The last 3 years especially were kind of a blur, basically up until I went to Costa Rica. So now that I've like reinvigorated my love for life, I can actually enjoy it again. The most important writing lesson I've learned, I don't know, I feel like this answer would change from day to day, so don't necessarily quote me on this, but I feel like studying story structure and just understanding how that works, not so I can copy it one-to-one in my work, but so I can understand like how much good structure lends to good pacing. That was a really important one, because I feel like consistently my weakness is pacing. It's a really tough one to do. Pacing is hard. It's hard to get right. I think there is such a balance between like not being too fast, not being too slow, and also like keeping momentum. That's definitely something I struggle with on a scene level. So understanding structure and understanding what beats more or less you want to hit in the next scene or whatever, that has really helped me. Next question is from Kelly. How many beta readers do I typically bring on for a project? And do they read my book in one go, or do I typically send them one chapter at a time? Or a few chapters at a time? This depends. This also depends. I have alpha readers who sort of keep me going. So these are my really close friends that I've known personally for years and years. So like my high school friends and middle school friends. If I'm drafting in the drafting stage, I'll send them complete chapters as I go along once in a while if they're interested, just to be like, hey, is this like readable? Like, am I on the right track? So that's more of an alpha reader. But for actual beta readers, I will usually enlist like 5 to 7, I'd say is a good number for me in each round. And for those people, for actual proper beta reader rounds, I will send them the whole book and sort of negotiate a deadline with them. I'm really bad in that as beta readers are reading my work, I will also be reading my work and beta reading for myself and making revision notes as I go. And then at the end, I'll compile all the revision notes and work from there. And that's basically a breakdown of my beta reading process, which is not really the question, but you know, might as well. I also talked more about this in an older video, which I can link below if I remember to. Next question is from Rachel Wrights, or actually a couple of questions. Have you written something lately that you love? No. I liked my short story Wisteria. Obviously, I didn't believe in it enough to pursue any like avenues of actually getting it published through a magazine or anything like that. I will say that I really have enjoyed some portions of my dark academia adult fantasy. I think I've really finally gotten the voice down and the language. I've been reading a lot more literary fiction just on the DL to sort of elevate my vocabulary and to, yeah, just get that like nice, I don't even know how to describe it, but you know how really good, well-written literary prose just flows? I've managed to capture that in some portions of that book. So I really like that. Next question from Rachel is, what's something you learned in 2022 about writing that you'll take into 2023? Tenacity, basically. In 2022, I did not finish writing a single book. I finished heavy revisions on one book, which led to nothing. And I think technically I finished revising my young adult fantasy that's currently on sub as well, but I didn't draft consistently. Like, it was really difficult for me to balance those really intense revisions and school and work and like volunteering and clubs. Like, my life just got way too out of hand that year. And then I went to Costa Rica and I basically did not write significantly that whole time. Yeah, just keeping at it and getting drafts done so I don't end up whiffling over the perfectionism. My goal is to finish 2 drafts this year. I don't necessarily need to finish 2 books, but 2 drafts would be great. Yeah, just keeping at it. That's gonna be my big lesson. And then do you have any personal goals for the new year that aren't writing related? This one is easy. I wanna climb V5s. I don't know if I've ever like talked about this other than in passing, but I'm from a rock climbing family. My dad is like a rock climbing gear designer, and my brother's a really good climber, and I did climb as a kid, but I didn't start taking it seriously until like roughly like a little less than a year ago, probably 9 months ago. And I am stuck at V3 and I want to challenge myself and push myself to V5. That probably won't make sense if you're not a climber, but just getting better at climbing, basically. Next set of questions is from Alexis. So how goes the submission/publishing process now that you have a literary agent? Is it mainly just waiting for responses from editors now, or are you working with the agent on revision/future planning? I've actually had a literary agent for like 5 years. No, that's way too long. Like 4-ish years now. It's been mostly the same deal since I got my agent. I've been doing revisions on finished projects, and then we got on submission, and then I work on a different project, and then revisions, and then submission, and you sort of rinse and repeat. And yeah, the submission process is waiting for editor responses, but thankfully, because I don't have to do anything actively while that's happening other than receive the occasional update, I just write. So I am just writing right now, and then once I'm done with this draft and have revised it enough times to make it acceptable for human eyes, my agent and I will revise it and then start coming up with a submission plan for it. Next question is from Super Freddy. Is there a bit of popular writing advice that just doesn't gel well with you? I hate when they say not to use adverbs because not only do I love them, I see them in books all the time. There's a lot. I kind of think popular writing advice is not very good because it's taken in a way that is way too black and white. And if it's geared at younger writers who then take that to heart and then like use that as a rule instead of as advice as it's meant to be, then the writing does suffer. There is a time and place for adverbs for sure. There's also a time and place for both show and tell. And things like don't kill your main character off. Anything that's like a rule for story specifically, I think, doesn't gel with me because I feel like you can do anything in your story if you can justify it. For example, like don't kill off your main character. Plenty of like really good media does that. Honestly, I hate the advice of save the cat to show the main character is a good person or the protagonist. Like that's so dumb. You can do that, but I see it, like I notice it so much. And it kind of drives me nuts. I don't know, anything that's like story related like that, and also anything that's presented as a rule and not advice, because advice, you should learn how to apply it and when to apply it on your own. All right, that ends the Q&A portion. Thank you guys so much for sending in questions. This was really fun, and I think I'll open up another Q&A next time for maybe another couple of vlogs or so. I'm gonna eat lunch and then back to it. Hey, okay, so had lunch, worked a little bit. I'm going to do some of my beta reading work right now because I have a project for a friend that I've been reading, and I'm also moving out of the attic because it got like weirdly cold, because it always does. And I think I'm gonna take a little bit of an inspiration walk after I get some work done in like the next hour or so, and then keep working. I'm like a little bit past or coming up on 8,000 words. I'm gonna try for the 10,000 word goal today, but we'll see if that happens. I'm not married to that. And yeah, so that's my little update for the afternoon, and I'll see you guys in a little bit. Oh my god, after literally days of struggling to figure out a lighting situation, I finally found one singular spot that's like consistently good for the natural light. It's so awkward because I'm in the attic, perched in front of like a covered window right now. I will get into it. But hey, welcome back. It's currently January 26th. I'm just filming a little writing vlog update before I go in to film some like writing content. You know, just gotta keep that content coming out, I guess. I did manage to hit 8,000 words a couple days ago, that same night that I was working on hitting 8,000 words, and then I wrote like 500 words the next day, and then last night or yesterday I didn't really write anything. Once I get some stuff filmed today, I'm definitely gonna go ahead and keep writing. My goal for today is 10,000, and then I feel like that's a pretty good stopping point for this vlog. I have a decent amount of footage, so I'll go ahead and just throw together a video. To go over what I've been working on, just sort of a recap so far, I'm still working my way through Act 1. As I was mentioning, it was a little bit difficult to balance the introductions for each of these characters because it's dual POV. I think I've got that down, but now I'm starting to wonder if there's enough thematic cohesion. Can you tell that I'm a really self-doubt sort of tendency type of person? I'm always second-guessing myself. This is one of the reasons why my early drafts are so polished, is because I'm constantly like questioning myself and pushing myself and just trying new arrangements of things, but it does kind of make drafting a really slow process. So I'm trying to haul back on that a little bit, but I might revisit those early chapters, the 8,000 words or so that I've already got written, just because I want to make sure that you can get a sense of what the story is about, and also the characters' goals, motivation, and their upcoming conflict, more or less, in those early chapters. I feel like it's super important to establish that. Otherwise, like, the story will feel a little bit boring, especially because it is a more drawn out introduction. That's one thing I'm worrying about, is that my work isn't compelling if you read it on the page. I feel like I have been focusing a lot on upping the ante in terms of my prose, and now I've kind of fallen back into writing stories that maybe like read a little bit boring. That's something I've been keeping an eye out for, because obviously you don't want that. You want your work to be compelling. There's a lot going on. I'm just gonna sort of get to it. I won't spend too much time revising, hopefully. I think my main priority is to write the 1,500 words or so I have left to hit that 10K mark today. But first, I'm gonna film some videos. It's January 30th. I'm officially finishing this vlog off toward the end of the month. It's currently around 11 a.m. or just past, and I've just hit 10,000 words in SWANS, so I've officially reached my goal for this vlog, which means I can finally be done filming it. I feel like I have been filming it for so freaking long. But a little bit of reflection on what I've been doing. I wrote around 1,200 words this morning, and I was actually using a method that I learned about in one of Chris MF's recent videos, which was basically just writing scenes dialogue first and then filling in the details later. So I was writing a lot of dialogue between characters that was fun and snappy, and dialogue is a little bit easier and quicker to write because you can hear it in your head. I can now say for a fact that it was a lot faster, and I was able to churn out all those words because I was using that method for the majority of the scenes I was tackling. I was starting to skip around. I was sort of writing like Act 3 scenes, which I shouldn't do, but at a certain point, you just kind of want to hit those word count goals. On word count goals, I think I keep coming back to this. I've definitely talked about this before, but the conclusion I'm reaching is that although I don't enjoy them as a means of tracking progress for my writing, they are good for me. It is good for me to get in my head about not losing numbers, which feel a lot more concrete to me anyway. Let me backtrack and explain that a little. Basically, what happens a lot of the time when I sit down to work on a manuscript is I will revisit scenes that I worked on previously, and I will often find myself deleting those scenes entirely. When I have a word count goal in mind, I can't do that because obviously if I'm deleting a 700 word scene and I write on average 300 to 500 words a day, I'm gonna lose like 400, 200, a certain amount of words per day instead of actually making progress. Obviously, that's not ideal if you have word count as a goal in mind. So by quantifying the number of words I write each day and just sort of like going at writing with a data first mindset, I'm able to force myself to just keep going and keep my eyes forward instead of constantly looking back. And because I've been doing this thing where instead I sort of tag scenes that I feel like I would delete normally and I end up revisiting them later instead, I usually find that I can come up with a solution that's like less drastic than just straight up deleting the whole scene, which is obviously good, so I can repurpose scenes so I'm not just constantly writing useless things that I then delete. So my conclusion here is I'm going to keep tracking my word count, and I'm going to keep using that Excel sheet / Google sheet that I showed you guys a little earlier in this vlog. I also like how it presents the data and visualizes that, so that's very useful to me. I have such a stronger grasp on my abilities as a writer, just in terms of like how fast I write and how quickly I can work. Now I know that in a 15-minute sprint, I can write anywhere from 500 to 600 words, which is like pretty cool. So I know that if I need to hit 500 words in a certain day, I can just do a 15-minute sprint and not worry so much about the quality of the writing until later. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of my updates. I will keep writing. I think I'm probably going to switch gears back to my dark academia adult fantasy for a little while, so upcoming vlogs may focus more on that as opposed to this young adult fantasy. In any case, thank you so much for following along in this vlog, and I'll see you guys next time.